In the vast and extraordinary catalog of the Beatles, every song tells a story of experimentation, collaboration, or conflict. But behind the bright melodies and timeless lyrics, there are darker moments too. Moments of frustration, rejection, and bitter regret. And few examples are more revealing than one particular track that George Harrison, the quiet Beatle, who would go on to write some of the band's most beautiful and enduring songs, came to despise. Despite his immense pride in its composition, the experience surrounding its creation left scars he would carry for the rest of his life. The song was Only a Northern Song. Written by George Harrison in 1967 and recorded during the sessions for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, it was meant to showcase his growth as a songwriter. Instead, it became a painful reminder of his limited role within the group, the creative tensions that were beginning to tear the Beatles apart, and the systemic dismissal of his artistic voice, even by those closest to him. By 1967, the Beatles were at the absolute peak of their powers. Revolver had redefined what rock music could be. Sgt. Pepper was about to push the boundaries of the album format even further, and the band was evolving from a global pop phenomenon into a groundbreaking artistic force. Yet, for George Harrison, the experience was bittersweet. While Lennon and McCartney dominated the band's creative output, contributing the majority of songs and naturally shaping the direction of each album, Harrison was left fighting for space. He had contributed classics like Taxman and If I Needed Someone, but those successes didn't change the fact that he was still, in many ways, treated like a junior partner in the group he had helped build. Only a Northern Song was Harrison's attempt to push back against that dynamic. At its core, the song is deeply sarcastic, a satirical commentary on the publishing arrangement that meant his compositions were owned by Northern Songs Limited, the company formed by Lennon, McCartney, and their publisher Dick James. George's frustration was simple. Even if he wrote a hit, most of the money and credit still went elsewhere. The lyrics, vague, bitter, and self-referential, reflect this disillusionment. The song isn't about anything, because, he suggests, it doesn't matter anyway. But the song's message wasn't the problem. It was how it was received. When Harrison brought Only a Northern Song to the Sgt. Pepper sessions, he was already struggling to have his ideas taken seriously. Lennon and McCartney were on a creative high, pouring everything into what they saw as their masterpiece. They were experimenting with orchestras, tape loops, and sound collages, pushing the boundaries of pop music. Against that backdrop, George's sardonic, psychedelic track, with its unconventional structure and caustic lyrics, was met with polite indifference at best. Producer George Martin reportedly disliked it, and even the other Beatles seemed uninterested. It was not included on Sgt. Pepper at all. For Harrison, this rejection was devastating. He had poured his frustrations into that song, hoping that its message might resonate, or at least earn a place on the most ambitious album of the decade. Instead, it was shelved. A creative defeat that stung deeply. The song would eventually resurface in 1968, appearing on the Yellow Submarine soundtrack. But even that felt like an afterthought. By then, Harrison had written far stronger material, and Only a Northern Song was already something he preferred to forget. The painful irony is that the song was prophetic. It perfectly captured his growing disillusionment with the Lennon-McCartney partnership and the business side of the Beatles. And as the band's internal dynamics deteriorated over the next few years, that sense of resentment only deepened. Only a Northern Song wasn't just a throwaway track. It was the sound of a man realizing how little his work was valued. The Sgt. Pepper period was a turning point for George Harrison. While Lennon and McCartney were fully immersed in studio experimentation and psychedelic concepts, Harrison's interests were shifting toward Indian music, spirituality, and deeper philosophical exploration. This divergence in creative direction made it even harder for his voice to be heard. Only a Northern Song, with its droning organ, loose arrangement, and deliberate disregard for conventional songwriting, was part protest, part coping mechanism. It was Harrison essentially saying, "If my songs don't matter to you, then they don't have to matter to me either." But behind the sarcasm lay genuine pain. Harrison was becoming increasingly frustrated with being treated as a secondary songwriter in a band where he was an equal member. His limited quota, usually 2 songs per album, was a constant source of irritation. And while Lennon and McCartney occasionally praised his work, they were often dismissive in practice. Only a Northern Song was one of the clearest expressions of that imbalance. Even decades later, Harrison spoke of the song with mixed feelings. He acknowledged that it was intentionally cynical and not one of his best efforts, but it remained a bitter reminder of a time when he felt powerless in his own band. Many Beatles historians have argued that the song's Rejection helped fuel Harrison's determination to assert himself more forcefully, a process that would eventually yield some of the greatest songs of the band's final years, like Something and Here Comes the Sun. From a musical standpoint, Only a Northern Song is often misunderstood. On the surface, it sounds chaotic, a swirling, off-kilter mix of organ, distorted trumpet, dissonant harmonies, and tape effects. But this was deliberate. Harrison was parodying the increasingly elaborate production techniques of the time, mocking the idea that music had to be meaningful or meticulously crafted to matter. Even the title itself was a jab. If everything is just a Northern Song, then why bother caring at all? The song's psychedelic tone also fits the era perfectly. In many ways, it's one of the Beatles' most experimental recordings, more abstract than Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and more self-aware than Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. Its lack of polish is part of its message, yet despite this conceptual strength, it was never given the attention or respect that Harrison believed it deserved. And that, perhaps more than anything, is why he regretted it.